l'irruzione dell'intelligenza artificiale.
The invasion of artificial intelligence in our lives is making us reflect on the nature of the human being.
In che modo può dirsi diverso e superiore?
How can the human being be different and superior to super-intelligent machines? Experts answer this by calling into question the human being's inner world, the spirit, usually packed with all the hopes, anxieties, values and concerns and dreams that are typical of humans. All the things that cannot be easily codified in some sophisticated algorithm. And this is why, today, we feel comfortable returning to a spiritual experience that has marked the life and the history of the Focolari movement. It happened in the Italian mountains, in the Alps, on the 16th of July, 1949, 75 years ago. The protagonists were Chiara Lubich and Igino Giordani, and we will now tell you a little about this event.
Sono ormai 6 anni che Chiara...
6 years had passed since Chiara, with her first companions, had begun a truly singular adventure of living the words of the gospel in a very intense way. We say 6 years because we take December 7th, 1943, as the beginning of the Focolare movement.
Da qualche tempo eravamo concentrati su un nuovo.
For some time, we'd been concentrating on a new point, the Word of God, which we were living with unbelievable intensity. We lived it continually. At that time, we didn't have to devote ourselves to the main structures of the movement. We had only to live the Word.
1949 was a special year in world history. We were beginning to experience the great divisions, which, on a global level, would later give rise to the Cold War. In short, it was a complicated year, in a complicated era, in which the great ideologies of right and left were dividing the world. This is what ideologies do. The spark that was ignited on the 16th of July 1949 with the pact between Chiara Lubich and Igino Giordani was at the service of recomposing in unity this humanity that was heading toward disintegration.
Towards the end of 1948, Chiara moved to Rome. This too was an important and challenging step. It was here that she also met the Honorable Igino Giordani in Parliament. However, life was very intense. Chiara and her first companions felt the need for a moment of rest, and at a certain point, they went to the mountains. It was there that they were joined by Igino Giordani, whom Chiara called Foco.
Era il primo anno che si andava tutti insieme a fare un po' di villeggiatura.
It was the first year that we all went on holiday together, and I was invited too. We went to a little village near Fiera di Primiero. It was called Tonadico. So I was there at the beginning. I spent about 10 days with them, with the Focolarine. I remember that they went to sleep in a sort of barn called a baita, cabin, which belonged to Lia, one of the first Focolarine. I stayed in a hotel.
Chiara Lubich e Igino Giordani, quindi.
Chiara Lubich and Igino Giordani, two very different personalities. Igino Giordani was much older. He was married and had children. He was a member of parliament, a man of vast experience and culture. Chiara Lubich was a young woman, enthusiastic about life and the gospel. Igino Giordani saw in Chiara a person who could accompany him in his search for a way to holiness, a search which had always been part of his life.
I wanted to fulfill a little of what was an obsession or an ideal of mine, don't know how to express it. And I wanted to be part of this community that was emerging, but to be part of it organically, not just spiritually or morally. So one day I proposed to Chiara. I said, "Listen, Chiara, I'd like to make a vow of unity, to bind myself for life to the movement, to be a Focolarino, even though I'm a family man, even though I'm a member of parliament, even though I'm a journalist, a writer, and so on."
In
that moment, I didn't understand the idea of only two people becoming saints, because I felt called may all be one, not two becoming one, but all becoming one. It seemed to me that Foco was under the influence of a grace which should not be lost.
Chiara non sente questa.
Chiara was not convinced of this request and saw it as something that didn't really resonate in her soul. At the same time, she wanted to embrace the inspiration that was obvious in Igino Giordani. We can already see in this the ability that each of them had to be ready to make room for the idea, the personality of the other. So what could they do? Chiara suggested that instead of a vow,
fanno un patto.
They make a pact.
And so I said, "Listen, let's do this. I'm not able to understand this unity between just two people. I want all to be one. So let's do this. Tomorrow we'll go to Mass. And when we receive communion, I'll say to Jesus, who enters in my heart, and Jesus, who enters in your heart, unite me to Foco as you want." I didn't know what he wanted. And I said to Foco, "You do the same. Say to Jesus, unite me to Chiara as you want. On the nothingness of myself, on this mutual love, bring about the bond that you want."
È una formulazione interessante.
It's an interesting expression. On our nothingness. What does our nothingness mean? Chiara herself explained. On mutual love. On love that has the measure of Jesus, who died and rose. So making room for the other, so Jesus can live among us. It was precisely this presence of the risen Lord among them that created a bond, Chiara says, a bond that expressed better what Foco had originally proposed.
L'abbiamo fatto.
We did this, and then we came out of the church. Foco had to enter the monastery for a conference with the friars. He was famous, and he often gave conferences. I was outside the church waiting for Foco, but I decided to wait for him inside the church. I was about to pray to Jesus in the Eucharist, in the tabernacle, to say to him, "Jesus," but I couldn't do it. That Jesus, in fact, who was in the tabernacle, was also here in me. And that Jesus in the Eucharist, in me and in Foco, had truly become the bond of unity between us. Because on our nothingness, I was nothing, he was nothing, Jesus in the Eucharist, there remained Jesus. On our nothingness, he alone remained.
Dopo cosa è successo?
What happened after that? Well, Chiara went immediately to her companions and invited them to repeat the same pact the following day. So straight away, a body made up of multiple members was formed.
Di più persone.
Il patto è stata un'esperienza mistica.
The pact was a mystical experience, something intimate between Chiara Lubich, Igino Giordani, and the first members of the newly born Focolari community of that time. It was a fruitful event from which projects, initiatives, and new currents of thought originated. A pact based on the nothingness of self, which, for example, naturally opens the way to the dialogues. The Focolari movement today is committed to working for the promotion of the dialogues between various Christian churches, with other religious faiths, and with men and women who have different visions and understandings of the world, with the world of science and of culture,
Lasciare spazio a Gesù fra
Making
noi.
room for Jesus among us
Lasciare che sia Lui
means letting Him be the one to bring about a new politics, an economy that keeps in mind the challenges of today and brings about a new culture. So making room for Jesus is living the pact today. We're all called to this. It's an adventure that we hope to take ahead together in an even better way.
Insieme, sempre meglio.